Thanks again for joining us tonight, folks. I think tonight's going to be a very important program as we unravel the financial aspect of what we're seeing in Syria. What's going on in Syria, what's going on in the Middle East in general, and what is taking place on a global scale. The last article I wrote, it's up on CanadaFreePress.com. That's CanadaFreePress.com. Gotta say, they're one of the last beacons of truth in North America, I believe. They are just tremendous people, CanadaFreePress.com. But they've been kind enough to publish an article of mine, just an update from the intelligence from the gentleman I speak with on a regular basis about what's really kind of an intelligence update or a Syrian update, Middle East update, if you will. And we better watch for false flags. Really, we should. And Joe and I were just talking about this before the show. Joe, what do you think about this?
I'm just sitting back.
You came in the studio and you were saying, man, I don't know.
It's confusing to watch what's going on, and I think they're doing that for a reason. Regardless, they are destabilizing the whole Middle East and creating the overall economic destabilization that we're going to get into tonight. And before we have V standing in queue, I'm going to bring him on in just a second. I talked to Brother Marcus today, and he just asked that everyone out there pray for him and his son Curtis for protection for things they're dealing with out there with their ministry in South Dakota. And he will be joining us next on September 4th, his birthday, on the second hour. He's coming on, so keep him in your prayers.
It's Marcus's birthday?
September 4th, when he'll be on our show.
Okay. And by the way, not only keep him in your prayers, but I do want to say that he needs help. And one of the ways, he's a very proud man. He's not going to ask for help, but one of the very ways that we can help him, he's actually assisting in the preparation of on behalf of people that don't have anything. Okay, you have to understand that poverty exists in America, and I understand that people go to different countries and they help out different countries, but here in this country where Marcus Samuel is at, he is actually setting up a reserve of food and doing a lot with the people on the reservation. I spoke with the owners of American Survival Wholesale at AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com today about this. If you want to help Brother Marcus and you've got the ability to do so, contact the owners of American Survival Wholesale, because again, what Brother Marcus is doing is setting up a reserve for food for people that don't have food. I mean, they don't have two nickels to rub together. It's that bad over there, and he's just doing a tremendous job. I'll probably get smacked for asking, because again, Brother Marcus is not had never asked me to say a word about this. But if you want to help Brother Marcus, send an email to American Survival Wholesale. They're in need. Brother Marcus is in need, as I understand it here. And let me just double check this, because I was taking on one of the notes of those 360 packs of food at AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com into the double digits. We're talking well over about a dozen and a half of those packs. That's based on the calculation to feed the number of people there for a 30-day period. So AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, Brother Marcus, you can just email American Survival Wholesale and ask what you can do to help if you are so inclined. But with that, a gentleman that we here at the Hagman and Hagman Report have come to know and come to respect, he's well known as V. That's his first initial, the Guerrilla Economist. This man has been in the banking industry for years. He has held significant positions at global banks, at world banks, at large banks. He knows what's going on from the inside. He's got his own set of contacts. He's got a number of sources that he taps on a regular basis. And I got to tell you that this last alert, and by the way, you can find his alerts. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, under tonight's broadcast, it takes you right to the Guerrilla Economist page on SteveQuayle.com, or alternatively, you can go to SteveQuayle.com and find his alerts. I got to tell you, I read the last two alerts. Why Syria? It's not what you think, and it's not what you've been told. That was August 25th. I thought, wow. I read that, and I was floored because some of the information meshed with mine, some didn't. I got to ask him about that. But this latest one, the implosion has begun, but not quite yet. At the point it does, it was a pleasure to know some of you, and it was an honor to serving all of you through the internet and radio. And I thought, man, I got to read this. I read it, and I got to tell you, I'm a little bit, no, I don't want to say shaken, but very concerned about this. So with that, Joe, why don't we bring V, the Guerrilla Economist, on? Again, a man that we have grown to respect, admire, and, respect for his knowledge and the contacts. What a great guy. Let's bring him on without further ado. V, welcome to the Hagman and Hagman Report tonight.
Hello, gentlemen. Hello. It's great to be here tonight and to share with all of you everything that's going on. I know the last two alerts, especially the last previous one, left quite a bit of people shaken.
Me included, man. We got to talk. I mean, when Steve called me like I don't know, it was like 6:30 in the morning, his time, 8:30 my time, and he said, "Hey, read this alert." And it's like, holy cow! Am I reading this correctly? But I think, yeah. So you got some splaining to do here, I believe. But
I definitely do.
Wow.
Well, here's what it is. This is what's going on behind the scenes. There was a tremendous buildup of hype going into this week, especially since that release of the, we all know it's a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of what Steve would say, Bravo Sierra, in terms of that chemical weapons leak, which now we all know that it's actually the Syrian rebels that released it, and there's video footage showing that. So the build-up to that whole thing, there was a massive surge that occurred with the media that there was going to be a strike on Syria by Thursday, which would have been today, to the point that it got me concerned, where I started to think, my God, I'm going to be, at that time, me and Steve thought we were going to be coming on together. And I was thinking to myself, okay, we're going to be coming online and speaking to people while there is going to be a possibility of an Archduke Ferdinand type event occurring in the Middle East that could be a huge trigger. So because of what was occurring, I made a couple of calls, tapped a few sources, and the real story of what's going on, and I fleshed it out for everybody, and I put it on Steve's website. And the implosion is coming, but not yet. The implosion has begun, but not yet. And what that simply is stating is that, yes, things are triggering up, things are really ratcheting up, and the pressure is on. But in terms of striking Syria, what I've been told is that it's not going to happen this week or even this month. And it's not going to happen in September either. And but the word is that past October, all bets are off. And the reason for that is this, okay? They have lost tremendous momentum in this build-up to the Syria hype. They did not get the type of effect that they wanted, number one. Number two, they underestimated how, thank God, that people are beginning to wake up and they are beginning to read from the script, and that this is a familiar play that these guys have done already. So the playbook has been kind of exposed. Number two, the powers that be really were a little too overconfident with these so-called rebels that they have doing their dirty work. They didn't realize that these rebels are idiots. They have a penchant I don't know what it is. They have a penchant for videotaping everything they do.
Well, yeah.
And this goes back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something that, and look, I'm of someone that has Eastern blood, and Middle Eastern blood that courses through my veins. And one of the most popular things there are dash cams. In fact, you can go on YouTube, and there's 1,000,001 dash cam videos of people riding around in the Middle East, in India, and in Russia with dash cams, and you'll see all sorts of traffic accidents and road stunts. So there's a penchant of this voyeurism slash rock star status slash I want to videotape everything kind of deal. So these morons who are incompetent to begin with, I mean, these guys are as dumb as a box of rocks. They were equivalent to the worst of the worst. Their IQs are room temperature. Okay, so these globalists didn't realize that these guys are such morons that this false flag event did not get the type of effect that they wanted. Okay, this was supposed to be a lot bigger, and it was supposed to really point towards Assad and his stocks of chemical weapons. The problem was they botched it. Didn't have the effect that it needed. Number one. And then the Russians are like, wait a minute, what are you talking about chemical weapons stockpiles? We're actually guarding it. They actually have Russian troops guarding Syrian stockpiles to make sure as a prerequisite of this whole UN shenanigans that are going on right now in terms of weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two, people started to realize, why the heck would Assad try to gas his own people when the man is clearly winning the war, number one. Number two, why the heck would he do it when the UN weapons inspectors are in town? I mean, whoever is writing the script for these globalist hacks are a bunch of morons. This is almost as funny as one of those 9/11 hijackers when his passport ejected through the plane, through the flames of 2,000 degrees, burning jet fuel and from a burning building and floating down to a New York City street in perfect order. I mean, this is that type of equivalent. Who writes this stuff? It's unbelievable to me. So, because of that, they realize that these cronies have botched it, and they're not getting that effect. So they tried to really bump up and make it more than what it seemed to be. And you've seen the result of this, okay? Number one, that Cameron and his war proposal to go to war with Syria alongside his longtime allies, the U.S., what happened to that? The House of Commons shut it down, stopped it in their tracks. The Brits don't want to get involved in war. They got enough domestic problems, and the people in Britain still have a voice, unlike over here in the U.S. They still have a voice, so that stopped it. So France, which originally started with, hey, we're going to go in there, this Hollande guy this guy couldn't, this guy couldn't run a lemonade stand. He's running a country with literally 100% tax rate. It's insane. So Hollande comes on board when this thing happened, and because he's becoming so darn unpopular in his own country, he thought it was a great idea to jump on the war bandwagon and get some much-needed distraction. Remember, I told you, Keynesian central banking ends in either collapse or war. And war is always a welcome distraction to Keynesians because it allows them to inflate, it allows them to dissolve certain bubbles. So Hollande thought, hey, this is my chance. Let's jump into this. And now when he realized that there's egg on the United States face because they don't even know initially who the heck did this, and the story doesn't fit, and it falls apart faster than a Lego construction set put together by a 2-year-old, Hollande backpedals. So what did he say? Oh, we should try more of the peace treaty now. Let's bring it back to the UN and have a powwow about it.
Right.
So those are the two things. But the biggest thing, gentlemen, and look, say what you want to say about the guy, say what you want to say about the country. My hat I would like to say a big thank you to Vladimir Putin. He drew the line, and he said no. And because he took such a strong stand, and because this man has a spine of steel, the pansies that are in the White House, the pansies running the Defense Department, and the pansies running the State Department, they all back down. They all back down. Now, there's this bluster of, Obama's moving a fifth boat over there, this, that, and the other. Not going to. It's just a show of force. They're not going to do much of anything, especially next week.
All right, folks. I think we are back up. Not sure. It's not showing on the studio yet, but Blog Talk says we are back up. Dad, you call me back on Skype at the studio. V, I think you're hot. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Saying we're still disconnected on BTR's end. You know, there's been a lot of talk about communications having problems today, and I don't know if this is a part of that or not. I don't understand what the problem is. We have not lost internet.
All right. Looks like we duct taped this back together, V.
Finally.
And I tell you, this is a testament to the, I believe, a testament to what you were saying, to the veracity, validity of the information, because obviously and I believe this, because talking to our engineer, Christians United and other places, okay, thank you very much. The other computer in the office is working, and we're up and running. Okay, good. Boy.
Where do we leave off?
I think you're about to get into the G20 meeting.
No,
that's right.
We left off. We left off with. That's where we left off.
Yeah,
no, it was just,
that's where we left off. Well, right. To recap a little bit, the meeting is next week for the G20. So the thing is this. Okay, here's the deal. The most important thing to these banksters is wealth. Okay, it's wealth. It's control of assets, real hard assets. Not about paper money. They don't need paper money. They have a printing press. They get created out of thin air. So that's not their interest. The whole Syrian conflict. If the audience gets a chance to go and read my alert that I put up about Syria, why Syria, what they're not telling you, and what you should know is it's about energy. Okay, it's about energy. The whole reason why we are in the Middle East is because to save and keep in place Bretton Woods II. It's to keep in place the petrodollar. That's what this whole thing is about. Now, every aspect, if you look at the maps, and you look at where every major U.S. military base is in Afghanistan, happens to be running across the proposed Caspian pipeline. If you look at Syria, you look at the three biggest cities where they're having the most problems and there's the most amount of conflict that the rebels want to capture, is basically Aleppo, Damascus, and Homs. Coincidentally, those are the three cities in which this proposed Arab North African pipeline is going to be running through. And I go into detail about Qatar, and Qatar's ambition in the region, so to speak, playing second fiddle to the Saudis. And you have the Saudis funding the Wahhabi death cult known as Al-Qaeda. And you have the Qataris, who have a very warm and cordial relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood. Hence, you have two levels of atrocities. On one side, you have church burnings, Christians being thrown off of rooftops. And on the other side, you have cannibals and cannibalism. People eating the hearts of their enemies, things of that sort. So these two things are basically, they're trying to fight for the spoils of Syria. And it hasn't really worked out well for them because, thank God, Vladimir Putin, it just sounds odd for me to say it, But thank God that Vladimir Putin stepped in and put an end to the shenanigans over there in terms of supplying Assad and making sure that his army stays afloat. So the banksters, like I was saying before, they don't want total destruction. They want to create, in the next coming weeks, in the next month or so, as much uncertainty in the marketplace as possible. Guys, let me tell you, what happened to the lead-up of this chemical weapons release? We've had a NASDAQ that shut down for a couple hours. We had the Eurex shut down for a few hours. We're having all sorts of, computer glitches. We're having all sorts of trade issues. We're having all sorts of problems with online banking. I mean, there's a lot of things that the banksters are doing. They want to create as much confusion. You see the insanity of the marketplace the last couple of days, the last few weeks. It's absolute insanity. It's bedlam. They're doing it on purpose because there are more assets that they want to seize. There are more forfeitures of wealth that is going on as disgruntled, scared, and downright absolutely bearish investors exit the market in fear, allowing them to buy up their assets and then try to pump the market back up. You take that into account. Then you look at the other operations of what's happening in Southeast Asia. That's the big news nobody's really talking about. You have India, which is basically one of the BRICS, and is a key member in the plan to create the BRICS Development Bank, which happens to be the counterweight to the IMF. And their currency is crashing 40%. They've created capital controls. They've tried to, they're trying to really rope in gold purchases as well as precious metals purchases, and that hasn't fared well. And it's creating more of a havoc over there, which is creating more pressure in the Southeast Asian economies, and it's going to affect China. So there's massive chaos going on, and this is what the banksters want. They want this for a couple more weeks so they can get the most out of the system. So that's what this whole buildup is. So this whole meeting going to G20, they're going to try and corral Putin to the table and try to cut a deal with him and say, hey, listen, could we please get this pipeline through? It'll be nice. I know, and we know that you're supplying all of Europe with natural gas. We would like to, get into that market, and we'll cut you a deal. That's basically what this whole G20 thing is about, is trying to bring Russia to the table. The point is, folks, is that Putin's not an idiot. You got these morons who are lifelong politicians and social coordinators who somehow, by graft and deception and downright selling of their souls, made it into top positions of power as elected officials in this country. These guys are chumps. These guys are a bunch of low-grade wannabes. And you got a guy who's a former KGB intel officer, a real genius. And these guys are playing checkers against the guy who plays chess. So right. Putin knows that he's not going to sit there and get into any sort of agreement that's going to compromise Russian power and Russian advantage. So this is the predicament that we're in today. Joe, you were saying something?
Well, this is Doug.
Doug, sorry about that.
Yeah. It just appears to me, okay, that Putin, and I mentioned this, I think yesterday, Putin sees himself as the Russian equivalent of John Wayne, and he's waiting for that moment to step forward. But what really gets me, and you said it at the beginning of the program, that he actually has the moral high ground in this whole issue, in this with Syria. and we're letting him be the good guy. And how convoluted is that? But back to what you were just saying just now. It's my understanding Putin's a billionaire. He's head of the one of the oil companies in the biggest oil company in Russia, I believe, or one of the biggest.
Yeah.
So okay, and you're right. We're playing checkers, or a lot of the world, particularly the United States, playing checkers, and he's playing chess, and that's three-level chess as well. But you mentioned something too about the Indian currency. Reuters just came out here a little bit ago about India. India is considering directing commercial banks to buy gold from their citizens. What's that about?
Yeah, I'm glad you say that. Now here's the thing. In America, you've heard the saying, there's a difference between Main Street and Wall Street. Okay, Wall Street's looking to rob Main Street, and Main Street's pretty much brain dead. That's the American situation. In India, is the exact inverse. Okay, you have their version of Wall Street, which is the Mumbai financial sector, and you got their Main Street over there. Okay, the difference is Indians, like most Southeast Asians, have a massive distrust towards their politicians and a massive distrust towards their financial system. Indians, for thousands of years, have always bought gold. They value the yellow metal as a store of wealth, and that's not going to change. So this pipe dream that can only come forth from the mind of a convoluted central banker, I mean, I'm convinced that central bankers are not human because they just don't understand human nature. In a country like India, where everybody holds gold, they would bury their gold, they will hide their gold, they will do anything they can. They're not going to give up their gold. Okay? So the situation when you have massive currency outflow, where everybody's buying gold, the currency, I mean, the rupee should be anywhere between 54 to about 60 rupees to $1 max. That should be the ratio. Rupees over that. It's about 63 almost, you know? So they have to do something. They have to corral this capital outflow. So rather than, controlling the expenditures, rather than dealing with some of these bubbles that have been created, well, what do? They stimulate a bailout package, and they pay 3 of their oil companies. They bail out 3 of their oil companies. The oil companies their Indian oil is one of them. They're pretty useless. They haven't really found much of anything. They don't have anything real. So they bail out these 3 shell companies, who, in all reality, is pretty much worthless, and they bail them out using not rupees but U.S. dollars, which is pretty interesting. Then this creates even more massive flight of capital. And now they're trying to control the capital flight, saying you can't, take your currency out of the country for X amount. You have to wait X amount of days, or you could only, wire X amount of money. When they're doing that, now foreign investment has stopped. Now foreigners are getting frightened. Hey, why would I want to put my money in India now? Because, there's a chance that my money could get seized up there. Nobody likes throwing good money on bad money. So the plan that these morons have come up with is basically, let's go after the people's gold. Let's see if the people will sell their gold back to the banks. So the Reserve Bank of India commanded some of their banks over there, the ICICI, Baroda Bank, State Bank of India, those are your big 3, to go ahead and, offer cash for gold. But the problem is, what are they going to be paying the cash in? Worthless rupees that are leaving the country. So the question becomes, what Indian in his right mind would give up his valuable gold for a worthless junk toilet paper currency? The answer is none. So where does that leave India? Well, I'll tell you the situation. India's going to have to do 2 things. And based on what they're going to do is going to affect, short-term, what the spot price of gold and silver would be.
Worldwide, right?
Worldwide.
Okay, good. Okay, go ahead.
The 2 options that India has is this, okay? Number 1, they're going to have to play the role of a bullion bank. And that means they're going to have to loan out their gold in order to raise capital to shore up some of their infrastructure and pay for some of their bailouts. Okay? That's number one. Number two, and this is the worst case scenario, they're going to have to sell their gold. The Indian government has a tremendous amount of gold. And back in 91, when they were in a similar predicament, what happened is they took about 67 or so tons of gold, and they lent it to the Europeans as collateral for a loan to help fix their financial maladies. So those are the two options that India has. And I think, because look, selling when the citizens of India found out what the government's doing, it was a massive shame. The Indians sold their gold as collateral to that loan to the Europeans in shame, with their heads down. It is a shame in an Indian community, amongst Indians, to lose their gold, because gold is very precious to them. It's a shame. It's like you're taking your family's heirloom, your wealth of a nation, and handing it over. It means something to these people. It's not like Americans, where we think in paper terms. So the only way they found out back then is one of the trucks that were transporting a pallet of gold actually broke down, and on the side of the road, and people saw the thing was filled with gold on the back end, and that's how the information leaked out. So I don't think they're going to be selling their gold. I mean, that'd be kind of stupid. If they do, they're the dumbest bunch of idiots on the face of the earth. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the government. I'm talking about the finance minister as a moron. But the next possible thing is playing as a bullion bank, where they loan out their gold. Now, here's where it gets tricky. A bullion bank doesn't have to necessarily report how much gold they have. So India could say, look, they have about, the total country in the last 10 years bought about 31,000 to 37,000 tons of gold. Okay? That is a lot of gold.
1.4 trillion. At least 1.4 trillion at the current
value.
Exactly.
That is $1.4 trillion in current value. So the thing is that they can loan some of that out as a bullion bank and overinflate the number. So basically, they're going to play fractional reserve with gold. And I think that would be the thing that they're going to try and do, which might, for the short term, affect the gold market. Now, if they do that, guess who's buying? China. The other Southeast Asian countries. Now, this is a ploy by the banksters because they got to get the dollar up. So taking out and putting massive pressure on one of the BRICS countries, India, okay, one of the countries that are fundamental in creating a BRICS bank, all right, taking them out of play or slowing them down is beneficial to the bankster scheme of keeping the petrodollar alive and well. Do you see how that fits? So that's what India is. India is being attacked. So when India's currency is going down, what's also affecting? Well, look at the trade partners of India. Malaysia is taking a hit. Indonesia is taking a hit. Thailand, the Philippines, Vietnam, the Asian tigers. Then you have the ASEAN countries. You got Australia. What happened to the Aussie dollar about a week and a half ago? They took a dive. So there are some major key things that are being done in order to prop the dollar up as a move of desperation. This is expected. I expected this to happen, and we're seeing this playing out. So it's very interesting. So this whole hoopla and build up to this so-called Syrian conflict that's going to happen this week, it doesn't seem like it's going to materialize. It seems to be backfiring in their face. Now, you got to understand, gentlemen, one of the things that this has done is driven oil prices through the roof. And now when the speculators realize that America has no credibility, I mean, you want to be embarrassed on an international scale? When we're the laughing stock of the world. We really are. And now these speculators have exposed, and we've basically played our hand, that we have no credibility. We really don't. So what happened to the price of oil today? Just a few minutes before the markets closed, a massive sell-off. Oil started dropping. So come tomorrow, you're going to see oil start off at the bottom and a continued drop tomorrow. So what was the inverse of that? Oh, we're going to strike Syria on Saturday. Oh, on Saturday. Why? Because now they realize oil's starting to drop. We've got to pump up that fear, create a little bit more of market malarkey in order to create more confusion. This is just to get the last vestiges of wealth out of the system. These are all plays of desperation. Very smartly played, but they underestimate the people. They underestimate human beings gravely. They could have pulled this junk off about 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But in the age where information moves so quickly, the age of Twitter, the age of Facebook, and granted, these are all intel ops, but information is very hard to cover. These guys are getting exposed with every hand they play. Now look at the unpopularity. Recent polls. You know, the support for a war in Syria is at 9%. It's totally unpopular. What happened to that false flag event in Boston? What happened with that? And who are these guys? They were Chechens. What did Saudi Arabia do? The Prince Bundar, who went to, I'll call him Prince Blundar, when he went to talk to Putin, threatening one of the largest superpowers in the world who has the ability to hit a button and turn Saudi Arabia into a glass parking lot. This moron, this buffoon is threatening Putin that, hey, if you don't back off of Syria, we might, those Chechen freedom fighters, those terrorists that we control, yeah, we happen to control them. And your Sochi Winter Olympics, we might just let them loose. And Putin's laughing at these idiots like, who are you guys? Who are you people? So their false flag event with Boston, that backfired on their face. It didn't have the effect. None of it made sense. So this age of information has really working against them. So what's their solution? We're going to shut down the internet. I mean, this is a joke.
Wow. Well, you know what? This kind of, and I'm trying to understand this, and I've gotten a lot of emails with people trying to understand the bigger picture here. V, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm willing to reassess my thinking here. Is it not the globalist bankers' intent to kill the U.S. dollar, the petrodollar, to kill it as the world's reserve currency, replace it with a basket of currencies? Is that not their intent? I mean,
yes.
Okay. So if that's
yes,
the case,
that is their intent.
Right.
And I'll show you where they divide. Okay, this is the problem. They want to create a basket of currencies, but they still want to have a Western form of Anglo-American, I'm not going to say Anglo-American, I'm just going to say a Western form of British banking still in place. Meaning they want a new basket of currencies, and they want to control the playing field. The SDR, underpinned by the Bancor, okay? They want to do that. But the problem is the Chinese and the Russians don't want to play along with it. Do you see?
Yes, that makes perfect sense so far. Go ahead.
So,
yep.
The Chinese are saying, oh, you want to create a basket of currencies, fine. You can have the yuan in there, but you want us to have the Bancor and everybody weighed by the Bancor. And the Chinese are like, well, why don't we just make the yuan and back that with gold and make you guys and all your currencies float with us? And then, that's where the contention is. You see, they want this new financial system in place, and they want these nations, some of these nations who have tremendous amount of national pride. And this is another problem with these banksters. They're idiots in the sense that they underestimate the power of human culture. And then that's why they have massive problems in the Middle East, because of culture. So you can't tell the Chinese, who have a very long genetic memory, and what I mean by that is They're not over the Boxer Rebellion. They remember it. It's taught in their schools as part of the curriculum, and they don't like it. So you're not going to tell the Chinese, who have a very rich 5,000-year history, that, yeah, we're going to subjugate you under our yoke, when China is loving the fact that they are a world power right now. China is loving the fact that in reality they have a larger economy than the United States, $9 trillion economy versus our $1 trillion economy. They love the fact that, they have some very advanced weapon systems. And why on earth would they want to subjugate themselves to a bunch of American, British, and European weenies? Why would they want to do that? And then you have the Russian bear. For 1 second, do any of these plutocrats, kleptocrats, and these oligarchs running around in the power circles in Europe and in England and in America, can any of these guys hold a candle? I mean, any of these guys ever even fired a BB gun? These guys who can't even fight their way out of a paper bag, and you're going to throw them against somebody, against someone who has the caliber of a Vladimir Putin, and expect this guy and the proud Russian people, who are a very proud and very strong-minded people, that they're going to be subjugated to this nonsense? No. So that's the problem that we're seeing today, and that's the infighting amongst what many would call the New World Order, or the globalists, or the banking oligarchs, the banksters, whatever, white shoes, whatever you want to call these guys. But that's the infighting issue.
So they're all basically what we're seeing is just the mob. I mean, if you look at the bankers and the different globalists, it's the Chicago mob and the New York mob and the Los Angeles mob on the global scale, fighting amongst themselves for turf, and that turf being the planet's economy, right? I mean,
exactly.
All right.
Exactly, but they don't realize exactly. They don't realize that the Russian mob and the Chinese triads are a lot more harder core than these guys. See, these guys have been at it for so long in the West. These guys have been at it for at least 200, 300 years. They've gotten soft. They've gotten bloated in their hubris, and that's why you've seen botched operations like this chemical weapons release and then all these other shenanigans that they're pulling, these botched operations. They've just gotten too soft. They've hired idiots, and idiots who suckered them into spending ridiculous amounts of money, saying, hey, you know what, we can get this job done. We can get this issue taken care of. And that's what you see. Okay. And they're not delivering.
Okay, and this is a question I was going to ask you right before all the technical problems that we had. You had mentioned, for example, the videotaping of everything, and that's right.
Yes.
Now, you saw the videotape. I take it you saw the videotape or the YouTube, the tape that was, or the video footage that was put up on YouTube about the chemical weapons attack, launching the chemical weapons by this.
Yep.
Okay. You know what bothered me about this, and I'm not sure what to make of this, is the fact that every single video I've ever seen with terrorists, rebels, whatever you want to call them, everyone had their faces covered. This one, these people are out there without any facial coverings whatsoever.
Right.
And I don't. What do you make of that?
I'll tell you, it's the generational shift. When Al-Qaeda. When Al-Qaeda was known as the Mujahideen, the freedom fighters of God, they had some class. It's like, if you will, it's like, being, I'm from New York, and, in New York we have the whole entire mob history here. See, the old school guys, the old wise guys, they had some class about their criminality, okay? The younger guys who kind of taking up the slack are dumber, all right? And they got way too much bravado, and they draw way too much tension, and that's why the mob fell apart in New York. Okay, so and look, I mean, it's so the same situation applies here. You got these punk kids, right, who are really have the IQ of room temperature, looking for some sort of glory, So they're videotaping everything, these maniacs, so they can put it on their Al Qaeda YouTube videos and Jamia Islamia and look at me, I want to be AllahFreedomFighter.com. And they're putting up all these videos, and they're exposing themselves. So the idiot State Departments and the fools of the Defense Department who are backing these morons, who have a very hard time even loading a gun at times or even holding it properly. These guys could have shoot a mailbox at 25 feet. That's how bad it is. And these are the ones that the globalists have entrusted the revolution and overthrow of Syria to. This is a joke. So that's what's happening, okay?
All right. And just to be clear, and I don't necessarily want to cause you to cover ground that you've already covered here, but sure. For those joining us late and just kind of a recapping of the situation, your take on Syria, and this ties in with the launching of the chemical weapons, obviously everything that we've found, it points directly to the Western-backed rebels, and I would stipulate that Syria would not have the problems it has in terms of a civil war, if there's even a civil war there. Would it be not for the Western influence and Western backing of the rebels, Western and Saudi backing of the rebels? So okay. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if you go back to Benghazi, you'll notice that the 5 or so warehouses across northern Libya between Derna and Benghazi, or even in Benghazi area itself, were Saudi, UK, and Qatari owned. But that said, it's obvious that the chemical weapons originated from the Al-Qaeda, or from our people, the people we're backing, that is. But I think I missed, because of the issues, I think I missed your position on Syria, where in terms of what we're doing there. We threatened to hit them on Thursday, or at least that's what was telegraphed. Everyone was saying that. Now it's Saturday. We're backing off that because of public opinion, or we're going to go through with it? Ultimately, are we going to go through with it, or is this just going to be thrown out the window and just a few hits here or there, kind of a slap on the wrist, and really not be anything of merit?
Well, everything currently is still at a hair trigger, because the problem is with this. Look, the leaders are incompetent, but the problem is you have assets there. You have warships. You have troops. All you need is somebody giving the wrong order at the wrong time and the wrong boat blowing up. And that situation where right now, as it is arrayed, if everybody, all the military assets that are there just holds still and does nothing, and allow these mumbling, stumbling politicians work out their claptrap, let them stumble onto this whole thing can just be over as a slap on the wrist. They'll hit a couple of targets that they've already leaked to Assad. Hey, we want to hit these targets. And Assad's already moved his, I think it was a couple of helicopter hangars, a few munitions dumps. And he's already moved those. He gives them plenty of time to move them. He's in no hurry. He's not going to change any of his recreational plans for that day. So if the goal is really, taking Assad out, if the goal is, and really, going full force World War III, they would have done this already. But you see this whimsical, half-hearted, excuse my language, but a half-assed effort into trying to deal with the Syria situation on behalf of the Western powers. They're hoping. See, the West doesn't really want to entangle in this. Their hope was the Qatari and Saudi-backed rebels. Okay, first of all, folks, there's no civil war in Syria. There isn't. Okay, what Syria is doing, and Assad said that, he said it best, we're a sovereign nation fighting Al-Qaeda. That's what we are. And he's absolutely right. So the hope of the Western banksters was the Saudis and the Qataris would do the dirty work. But they've kind of stumbled and fell on that. So what do? I mean, what options do these guys have? Oh, let's go. You know, there are pundits out there that say they're going to start World War III. They're going to go ahead with the Russians and they're going to nuke it. I don't see that unless it's a you know, I don't see that right away. I really don't. And like I said, there's not going to be, you know, what I've learned is there's not going to be an attack this month or next month. You know, but October, you know, things are in the air. So, I mean,
okay.
If there is a strike, it's going to be a limited and very contained strike on targets that have no value.
Oh, okay, because in your latest alert, you do say that the latest drumbeats are an imminent strike by Thursday, which is today, of course. There were massive fears in the market, and oil prices are surging. And then you continue by saying that, let's see here, the news that you had gotten from your sources run inverse to what many are saying. And so if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is, don't look for anything of significance to happen with Syria in Syria, unless, barring, of course, somebody with a hair trigger or perhaps even a Gulf of Tonkin type of an event there, until later, perhaps October, right? Or at some point.
Exactly.
Okay, but is it the globalists? Is it the international bankers' plan though to take down Assad? Is that still on their plate, or is that just a Western?
It's still on their plate. You know, there's some very, very valuable natural gas fields right off the coast of Syria and Lebanon and Israel. Now, this also happens to be off the coast of, are you ready for this one? Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. Isn't that interesting that every single one of those countries have been toppled? So the last two remaining outposts will be Lebanon and Syria. So they have to create this pipeline somehow. That's what they're thinking. The person that's stopping this whole thing is Vladimir Putin. It's the Russians. They put the kibosh on this whole thing. And I don't see anything happening barring a Gulf of Tonkin type incident or some mumbling, stumbling idiot happens to, you know, get a little trigger happy and shoots the wrong boat at the wrong time and in the wrong place. And then all bets are off at that point. But they got some serious trouble because, look, the Russians don't play games. If any of you remember what happened in August 8th, 2008, when Cheney wanted to go ahead and use Vishenko, the guy from Georgia. Was it Vishenko? I don't think so. That's probably Ukrainian. But anyway, the president of Georgia, and having Georgia attack Ossetia, and then saying, "Oh, look, the Russians attacked Ossetia," when the Russians responded to protecting Ossetia, which is, number one, 90% of the people that live in Ossetia are Russians. Number two, it's part of under Russian control. So they wanted to go full force in triggering a war on 8/8/2008. And what happened at that point, you know, the Russia stepped in and said, "You try to do this, we'll go nuclear." And that's what backed Cheney off and the Americans off from you know, really ratcheting that up. That and the fact that they were getting their butts kicked by the Russians. The second incident was in the Strait of Hormuz, when Cheney again had a bunch of SEALs on high-speed patrol boats in incredibly bad accents, calling up American destroyers and Aegis missile cruisers, zipping right by them in the Strait of Hormuz, saying, "We will kill you," and some really bad Persian accents. It was really horrible. I mean, who writes this stuff? And that thing came to an end when actually, believe it or not, it was actually George W. Bush who told Cheney to knock it off. I'm the president, not you. And he felt something in his heart for these, for needlessly throwing these SEALs in the line of fire. I mean, that's what I've been told, you know, but that's, you know, whatever the case may be, that whole issue came to an end. So, in other words, the Russians don't play around. So when they are massing forces in Syria, Russians already said, listen, you know, don't do this, number one. Number two is, you know, they made it known to the international community that the Americans have no idea who they're funding. And Putin and the Russians have the high ground. They have the moral high ground. Look, if God is with any country right now, guys, I'm telling you right now, he's with the Russians. Watch. Not only are they stance of what's happening in Syria, is the only one protecting Christians in the Middle East, in Syria in particular. And I'm like, my God, I mean, you know, we're funding the maniacs. They're trying to protect and keep peace, so to speak, okay? But they've said it clearly that any sort of attack on Syria, anything that will really harm Assad or try to topple him, or any attack on our assets, we will respond, and we will respond accordingly. They don't play. So when the Russians, you know, make a threat like that, they follow through. They're not like us where they said, oh, we're gonna bomb you on Thursday, and here comes Thursday, and there goes Thursday. We might do it on Saturday. There's no support for this. So Obama, what's he going to do? Go at it alone? This guy's had enough scandals to deal with. Okay? People think, oh, Obama's going to go at it alone. Look, the man's a clinical psychopath. All right? But he knows what's political suicide. He's got way too many scandals, number one. He's got way too many issues. He needs some sort of support. So for him to go at it alone, when already, from what I've heard, there was an attempted coup on this guy, all right? I don't think he's going to do that with zero support. So what's the option? What's the option, Doug? And I think your source from the DHS said it best. They're going to have to create a massive false flag here, so the American will put his tail between his legs and suckle up to the breast of big government and say safe.
I want to apologize for these issues, and I know they're out of our control, but these things do happen sometimes, and just got to go with the flow, I guess. And we're not going to play this game of cutting off, cutting on. We want to do a good professional show with the audio quality that we should have. And it was different. Something was different about the sound issues tonight because if it wasn't BTR dropping off, it was CUBN. And if it wasn't CUBN, it was one of our individual Skypes. And the studio was going hectic. It still is. Very different. I've never seen the sound issue so bad. And then we apologize for having to cut this short, but from what I hear, my dad talking to V on the phone as of now, we are going to reschedule this for Sunday, I believe. But we will be back tomorrow with IOTA. And again, I do apologize to each and every one of you. Join us tomorrow for IOTA, and then I think Sunday with V, we will definitely let you know. Send Blog Talk an email if you want. We will do the same. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening or trying to listen. We really appreciate your patience and your time, and we really apologize for these sound issues. Have a great